let's transition back to some college football. And it's time for us to the Georgia Bulldogs dominating performance over the TCU Horned Frogs. I want to welcome to the show wise guys, college football analyst, Tony Hollandsworth. What's up, Tony?
How's it going, man? I listened to that whole Aaron Rodgers thing, and you know how big of a fan I am of Aaron. So that was good to listen to, man. I'm happy that as a Packers fan, you've seen what critics like I say about Aaron all the time. So I'm happy to see it, man.
Yeah, man. I love him. I love him. He's an all-time great. He's honestly, to me, he's the greatest Packer quarterback, in history. But we got to start being honest about it, man. In these big-time moments in big games, he's came up small. He's definitely came up small.
And can I ask you one quick question about it? Because I know you want to move on. I don't want to hold you up on the subject. Does he kind of remind you of Brett Favre there at the end of his Packer days? Like, he kept mulling retirement. He wouldn't really give him a definitive. Like, they had a guy that they wanted to try to go with. Aaron was obviously a little bit more proven than Jordan Love is, but does it kind of give you Brett Favre feelings again? Like, that's what it reminds me of.
Absolutely. And it's crazy because, obviously Brett Favre, he had a chance to mentor Aaron Rodgers in the early part of Aaron Rodgers' career. And I thought there was a time there where Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre, they didn't have the best relationship, Tony.
Yep.
And, lately, over the last couple years, they've developed a good friendship and a better relationship now than in previous years. But I think it's one of those things to where, like, how sometimes when you're a child, you see your parent as you grow up and go through the years, and you're like, I don't want to be nothing like my dad, or, I don't want to be nothing like my mom. And then you grow up and you have people tell you, you're just like your mom and your dad.
Yep.
And I think that's kind of what's going on with Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers was trying to be the opposite of Brett Favre in the early part of his career. But in the end of his career, with all this mulling retirement talk at the end of the season, it reminds me of Brett Favre in a very, very similar way.
Mm-hmm. That was my thing, is like, I don't think he got him when he was younger because Brett didn't want to teach him. So they had a little bit of that beef as a result. And now Aaron having be that guy, potentially they're trying to push him out the door. I think, like you said, now he's grown up, he kind of understands where Brett came from, of like, hey, this is why I was the way that I am. So yeah, I agree. I think now the last couple of years, Aaron's gotten to see that and kind of knows where Brett was coming from, that the difference and that level of respect is finally there that he maybe didn't have to start with.
Yeah, for sure. Now let's transition, Tony, to the national championship. Georgia beat TCU 65-7 to repeat as champions in college football. For TCU, Duggan went 14 of 22. He had 152 passing yards, 2 interceptions. So a game for him to forget about and not remember. Stetson Bennett had 304 passing yards with 18 of 25, 3 touchdowns. He was named the offensive MVP for this game. So the Bulldogs, they get it done for a second consecutive year and repeat as champions. Tony, what was your overall takeaway from the Bulldogs' dominating performance over the Horned Frogs last night?
That not only is the SEC the conference to still beat, and I know a lot of people say the SEC, if you really look at it, there's only 3 teams that you really have to worry about in the SEC. That's Georgia, Alabama, and partially as a Tigers fan, I'm going to say LSU, because you look at what LSU was able to do this year with Brian Kelly in his first year. A lot of those guys are going to be coming back next year. Tennessee, you're going to have to be on the lookout for, but Tennessee's quarterback situation is what kind of, makes me a little bit skeptical about them. But honestly, I mean, this just shows that the SEC has continued to be in a different class altogether about how they play football. And you look at, you mentioned it earlier about how well Kirby Smart has done. He took a lot of that Nick Saban Alabama philosophy, brought it over to Georgia, and he's been able to run with it. I mean, you look at the depth that Georgia had with the 4- and 5-star recruits that they've got. TCU can't match that. I love the TCU story. They went unranked. They started getting a lot of wins. They started beating teams that they, quote, weren't supposed to beat. Yeah. And honestly, they fared a lot better against Michigan than what I thought they were going to. When I saw that first run by Donovan Edwards, it was a 57-yard run. I was like, oh, man, here we go. This is going to be what we figured it was. Michigan's going to bully them both offensively and defensively. to me, that was part of Michigan kind of being cocky. I think not really respecting TCU and not knowing what to expect.
Yeah.
And for me, when Georgia had a little bit of that heart flutter, that heart scare from Ohio State last week, that to me, sent a message to Georgia like, hey, we can't just be walking in thinking that we're going to march all over people, especially with an Ohio State. So I think that they took TCU probably the most serious that any other team has taken TCU seriously this year, aside from Kansas State, who was able to get the win over TCU in the Big 12 championship, obviously. But to me, this was a statement from Georgia. I don't necessarily know about a dynasty. I know they let Beck come in as a backup quarterback there in the third quarter and let him play for a lot of it. A lot of handoffs to kind of maybe see what they've got. But this was a dominant statement from Georgia that, hey, we're still the champs for a reason.
Now, let's talk about Stetson Bennett, Tony. In the playoff game against the Buckeyes, he went 23 of 34, threw for 398 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. Obviously, last night, 18 of 25, he threw for 304 passing yards, and he had 4 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. He even ran for 2 touchdowns. And, obviously he was named the offensive MVP for the second straight year. He finishes his career 29-3 as the Georgia Bulldogs starting quarterback. We know his story. He's an underdog, and he came a long, long way, Tony. What do you take away from this type of performance in this big game from a player like Stetson Bennett?
That honestly, he did what he needed to do in the situation that he was in. He managed the game well. He protected the ball. He was smart. Like, I'm not necessarily the biggest Stetson Bennett fan, but I'm not a Stetson Bennett hater. I really don't have anything against the guy. Like you said, he's a great story. He walked on in Georgia, knew he wasn't going to get a lot of playing time, went to junior college to be able to get the reps, get the experience, and then, of course, comes back. He's sitting behind JT Daniels, who 5-star prospect. We figured, okay, he's going to be the guy to lead Georgia. Ends up getting hurt. Stetson comes in, and Stetson did absolutely what he needed to do. But I think what also really helped him is that he didn't lose that confidence, even when Georgia did struggle a little bit, even after they got beat in the SEC championship last year against Bama, that he wasn't going to let that, overtake him, that he was going to continue to do what he needs to do, because he proved that he could be a winner. He proved that he could be a starter, and he just continued to roll with it. And even in a sit-down interview, he mentioned that he's tough, that he has the grit and the perseverance to keep going. So, I mean, it showed a lot about Stetson as far as his character, that even when he's had, chances like against Ohio State when they were down, that he kept his same grit. He's not freaking out. He's not trying to force the ball. I will give him credit. He's the type of quarterback that I'm not going to freak out. I'm going to do what we can do. If we can move the ball, sweet. And I'm going to make plays where I need to make plays, whether that's by throwing it or moving it with my legs. Because that's where I think a lot of people don't give him as much credit as he probably deserves. He is good with his legs.
Yeah, he is. I agree. Last night, let me see. What did Bennett have? Bennett, last night, he ended up having 39 rushing yards on 3 carries last night for 2 touchdowns. So I agree with you 100% about that. Like, I don't think he gets enough credit for his playmaking ability at the quarterback position.
Yeah. And I don't know if, and I kind of wonder hypothetically if that isn't kind of, because this is how I kind of grade Alabama quarterbacks, is because you look at most Alabama quarterbacks when they transition from Alabama to the NFL, how many of them pan out super great?
Yeah.
Not a lot.
Right. Not a lot.
Like most of them usually don't make it past their rookie contract, or if they do, they're usually career backups. Like Mac Jones, he's only in his second year, about to go into his third. Jalen Hurts, I don't know how many people really still consider him a part of Alabama, considering he had a really good year with Oklahoma his final year before being drafted. And of course, Tua, unfortunately, he's been injury prone, but when he does start, Tua has been fantastic. So this latest group of Alabama quarterbacks have kind of broke the mold so far. But I wonder if for Stetson, if he doesn't kind of get that same Alabama treatment. Well, look at all the first rounders that you have on offense. Look at all the first rounders you have on that defense. And I mean, honestly, I don't know about you, but when I first saw how many people got drafted off of Georgia's defense last year in the first round, I thought, okay, the defense can still be good. I don't think they're going to be near the level. And to me, they weren't, but they were still one of the best defenses in college football this year. So I wonder if that's maybe not why people don't give him as much credit as he deserves because he has such a great team built around him. It would be really hard to screw that up.
Agreed. And it in a 65-7 game, Tony, it's kind of hard to find a turning point in that particular game. But for me, I thought the turning point came in the first half. TCU, they were already down 24-7. They desperately needed a touchdown scoring drive just to build some confidence, as we got into the second half. And they were driving, and Dugan throws the interception to Javon Bullard. And I thought that was the turning point in the game. Georgia goes on to score. It's 31-7. And at that point, the game was over. And I thought that was the biggest play and the biggest turning point of the game, especially in the first half before it got out of hand. What was the turning point for you? Was that it, or was it another particular play that you remember?
To me, I'll go a little bit earlier, but really close. I'll go to when they're down 10-0. TCU's able to come back. They get the score, and then it's 7-10. But then they've now started to notice that on 3 consecutive drives, because the next one they got another touchdown, so it's 17-7. To me, I think that's when TCU, their spirit kind of break a little bit, because now their defense hasn't been able to get a stop like what they've been able to. And you look at that defense, they're not the greatest, but they're opportunistic. They take the best of what they can get. They'll get fumbles, they can take the ball away, and they make do with what they get. And you look at Georgia, Georgia's not a team that makes a whole lot of mistakes like that. Look at the game, like you said, against Ohio State. That was really more of our national championship game than the one against TCU. And, Georgia made, one mistake with the interception by Bennett. And it wasn't like it was a, just dumb pass. It was Ohio State just got physical and took the ball. So, to me, that was kind of the turning point when it was 17-7. I was like, man, TCU, you're falling behind early against a good team. And I kind of think that was the thought that they had, like, man, we're falling behind to a good team. They're not going to let us, just score willy-nilly. They're not going to let us get back in this game. And I think really the nail in the coffin at that point was when they got that next touchdown to make it 24-7. I was like, yeah, that's probably game over right there.
He's a sports analyst / podcaster. He is the Wise Guys college football analyst. He is Tony Hollandsworth. Tony, let's talk about Kirby Smart. And obviously, a lot of Alabama fans, they feel like today, like, hey, I kind of told you so. Hey, if we were in the national championship, it would have been a much closer game. And, I feel like you can't allow a team into the college football playoff with 2 losses. It just can't happen. I just don't believe that they deserve to be in the college football playoffs over TCU. Now, I do believe that Alabama versus Georgia would have been a much more competitive football game, the same way Georgia versus Ohio State was a competitive football game. But when you look at Kirby Smart in comparison to Nick Saban, this is their first seasons with their teams. Kirby Smart or Nick Saban, he went 79-15. He won 84% of his games, 3 national championships. Kirby Smart, 81-15. So he's won 84% of his games, and he has 2 national championships. So do you believe that Georgia is now the standard in college football and it's no longer the Alabama Crimson Tide?
I'm not going to give him that early yet. Because I think a lot of the reasons why people give Alabama that crown is because they've done it for so long. Alabama has had Nick Saban since 2009, if I remember correctly, 2009, 2010. So he's been there for over 10 years. Georgia has been good for the last few years, but it was always that they can't get over the hump. They can't win the chip once they get there. Yeah. And now that they've finally done it twice, you can definitely make an argument that they're one of the best programs currently right now in college football. I don't know if I would necessarily put them as the standard. And again, this is coming from a guy that I can't stand Alabama. I was a big proprietor when I would see Alabama fans, and I'm not going to disagree. If Alabama was in the national championship, it would be a much more competitive game. It would be interesting. But I'm going to tell everybody the same way I've told Alabama fans. there is no such thing as a good loss. You don't, to me, if I'm the college football playoff committee, unless everybody has at least one loss, maybe two, then we can make an argument.
Yeah.
But you can't tell me, well, we lost the absolute best and we lost to the best teams. There's a lot of teams that can make that type of argument. Like you could look at Ohio State. Well, we lost to Georgia by 1 point. We should be in the national championship, not TCU.
Yeah.
Like,
agreed.
So to me, I would say they're really close. If they win maybe another championship here, either this next year or the year following, make it, 3 in the last 4 years, I would definitely be willing to make an argument that they're the standard now. But right now, I'd say it's still a little too early to give them that crown.
Now, Caesar Sportsbook, they came out with their best odds to win the college football championship next season, Tony. And I'm going to give you some of these numbers. We got Michigan at a plus 1,400. We got LSU at a plus 1,400. USC plus 1,000. Ohio State plus 650. Alabama plus 550. And Georgia plus 75. TCU is a plus 4,000.
Mm-hmm.
So it's early, but we can think ahead. Who would you say are the favorites, heading into the next season to win the national championship? Who would you say is the favorite?
Out of those three, I do agree. I think Georgia, Ohio State, and Alabama are probably the three favorites, just because they're more than likely they're going to at least be in the championship game for their potential conferences. They're all three gonna be absolutely fantastic as far as the year goes. The fourth one is where I have a lot of doubt. I don't know how well Michigan is going to do because their offensive line is going to be picked thoroughly through the NFL draft. You don't get the two best offensive lines 2 years in a row and then not be picked pretty slim. They do get the advantage. They'll have Blake Corum back. I believe they'll still have Donovan Edwards. They'll still have J.J. McCarthy. So they'll still have a good roster. Although the other question is will Jim Harbaugh be there or not? And there's a lot of skepticism. There's rumors flying everywhere. He's connected to Denver. He's connected to Carolina. He's connected to Indy. And of course, we're still hearing about NFL coaches being fired as it currently sits. So there might be another team that potentially pops up that he may or may not go to. The one that I could probably say definitive, I don't think is going to be in the title picture. I'm going to say USC. And I say that not because they're not a talented team and not because I don't think Lincoln Riley couldn't do it. Lincoln Riley has probably one of the most prolific offenses in college football, but a wet paper bag has more of a defensive stop than the USC Trojans do. And he brought the same guy over with him from Oklahoma, and you probably saw Oklahoma last year, and it was like their defense was absolutely terrible. They'd have to get in shootouts, and you can't. And you saw it against Utah, a big physical team that said, okay, well, we'll be able to stop your offense. And when we do, we can just use our offense to run all over you. So USC is the only one for me. I would probably guarantee it isn't going to be in there, even though they're probably favored to be.
Now, the one thing questions I got when it comes to Alabama, Tony, is obviously Alabama, they went from Tua and they had Mac Jones. And then, Bryce Young, he's going to go to the NFL now. So, what is the next steps for Alabama, and who is going to be their future quarterback for next season?
I don't remember his name. I did see that he is a 5-star recruit. If I remember right, I think he's going to be a freshman coming in.
Okay.
So they have one of the top quarterback prospects out there. That to me is probably where I didn't really understand why Bryce Young played in the Sugar Bowl. Because it wasn't going to change the playoff standings. Like they still weren't going to go into the national title game, but they're like, well, Bryce is going to play. And I'm kind of sitting here thinking, well, why? Because, why don't you want to see what you kind of have, which they did. They ended up, they took Bryce out for the same reason. They were so up on Kansas State. There was no way they were going to come back. But I believe this prospect hasn't even signed with Bama yet. So he will be here this coming offseason. So they don't really have much to evaluate him on. But it does kind of make me wonder. I wondered a lot this year with this current Alabama team after, again, the slew of first-round picks that got picked, Jameson Williams, John Mechie, all of them got picked in the NFL. And I had Alabama fans saying, well, this is a better team than last year. And I'm kind of like, how? Like, I don't know the names of your receiver. I don't know the names of hardly anybody on your team other than Bryce Young, and Will Anderson. I don't know the names of hardly anybody on your team.
Agree.
What do you mean this is going to be better?
I agree.
No. So
agree.
But I think with Nick Saban, and especially how I believe he's probably going to tackle that team this offseason, because this Alabama team was not only, to me, kind of held back by a lack of talent. This was an undisciplined Alabama team, which is one that we've never seen this bad of an undisciplined team from a Nick Saban being coached, coaching the Alabama Crimson Tide. So I think they will be better. I still think they'll probably win about 10 to 11 games. I don't think they'll lose very many this coming season, but it will be interesting to see, because I don't really know where to gauge Bama. Like I said, I still would put them as a favorite, and until they really just start losing 3 or 4 games this season, I'm still going to consider them a favorite to go in it, just because of Nick Saban, and we know what Nick Saban can do.
One more question for you, Tony. Obviously, Max Duggan, he had a rough night last night, didn't have a great performance, threw 2 interceptions, but for the season, he had 32 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, 3,698 passing yards. He completed 64% of his passes, and coming into the season, he was a second-string quarterback, only got to play because of an injury, and he ended up being a Heisman candidate. What do you believe Max Duggan goes from here? Do you believe that he can be a possible quarterback in the NFL at the NFL level?
I'm going to say no. Looking at both him and, honestly, I'll say this too about Stetson, I don't know if either one of them will have enough talent around them to make it work. Now, I could see a Max Duggan being a very good backup, kind of filling in and probably winning you some really good games. Kind of like that Chase Daniel role, kind of a little bit like I'm trying to think of like Gardner Minshew kind of started out as a little bit of a backup role.
Cooper Rush for the Cowboys, maybe something like that. Maybe
a little bit like a Cooper Rush. So I think he could be good. I think he could be serviceable. I don't trust him enough to be a starter, just because we know he can throw the ball. We know he can make it work with what he's got. But what kind of makes me a little bit hesitant is he is more of a running quarterback. Like, he can make plays with his legs, and as we've seen throughout college, throughout the NFL, those types of guys typically don't last very long, because you're going to have much bigger, much faster guys hitting you. And those injuries tend to last a lot longer. So I think he could still be a very good NFL quarterback, but I don't see him being a proven starter for an NFL franchise in the foreseeable future.
Tony, let everyone know where they can find you on social media.
Yeah, you can find me on Facebook at Inside the Hoosier Mind. You can also find me on Instagram at the same tag. On Twitter, it's at Hoosier Mind. And you can also follow me on TikTok as well at Inside the Hoosier Mind. And before I go, sir, I do have a quick question, kind of going back to the Bulldogs this season and the last 2 seasons.
Okay.
I saw something today in a Facebook group. I know it's kind of I'm going to say it's a little bit of a troll, but I've seen some really crazy Georgia fanatics out there. They're saying that this Georgia team is better than the 2019 LSU Tigers that won the national championship. What are your thoughts on that? Because I can tell you, as not only a Tigers fan, I'm like, absolutely not. As a college fan, I'm like, absolutely not.
Yeah, I disagree. That LSU Tigers team as an offense, they were a very, very high-powered offense. I mean, remember, and I talked about that earlier. I will say this too, Tony. I did say that Stetson Bennett's performance in the national championship, it reminded me of Joe Burrow's performance in the national championship against Clemson. Burrow, I think he went like 31 to 49, 463 passing yards, 5 touchdowns. But to answer the question, that LSU team, they had Jamar Chase, they had Justin Jefferson. I believe they had Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Like, are you like really? And Joey B. These are players who are performing at a high level at the NFL level. like now defensively, that Georgia Bulldogs defense is the real deal.
Yes,
they're the real deal. So I like that Georgia defense maybe more so than that LSU Tigers defense at the time. Not trying to take nothing away from them, but I think that LSU Tigers offense was better than this Bulldogs offense.
Yeah, and I'll say too, to me, LSU beat more They beat honestly to me tougher opponents than Georgia did. Like you have to remember, they faced number 9 Texas and won. They faced number 7 Florida, won.
Yeah.
9 Auburn, 3 Bama, 4 Georgia for the SEC championship, then 4 Oklahoma, and then 3 Clemson in the finals. Georgia beat Oregon to start the season. They were ranked number 11, pretty well. They beat Tennessee, obviously, and then they beat LSU at 14, and then Ohio State at 4, and then TCU at 3. So yeah, I agree. Defensively, I would 100% support that argument. But when I saw that offensively, I was like, y'all are going a little crazy right now.
They're going too far.
I'm like, y'all, you can't, like, you look at Justin Jefferson now for the Vikings, and you look at Jamar Chase for the Bengals. I'm like, and you got to think that was with Joey B. Like, there is no offense to me right now currently that is beaten that. No way. Absolutely not.
No way. And Joey B was in a zone.
Yes.
He was in a zone during that run for the LSU Tigers.
Yes.
He won the Heisman Trophy, and that performance that he had in the national championship game against Clemson was one for the ages.
100%. And his game against Bama, I mean, he had a phenomenal game against Bama as well. So, I had to
Alabama. Come on now.
Yeah, and I had to ask because I saw that. I was like, am I crazy? Like, no, there's no way.
Yeah, for sure. He's a sports analyst and podcaster. He is Wise Guys college football analyst Tony Hollandsworth. Tony, I'm definitely going to bring you on during the offseason, during college football. We're definitely going to talk some more college football for sure.
Yeah, by all means. And if you ever want to talk NFL, I'm all for it. I don't just critique Aaron Rodgers. I try to be a little bit of a realist to everybody. I mean, I'm a Cowboys fan. I got to be somewhat of a realist because everybody else is way out there. I got to bring everybody back. Like, no, it's not our year. Come back, reel it back.
Real quick, are y'all going to beat Tom Brady? Are y'all going to be able to beat Brady?
The realistic person in me says no. Just because, I mean, it's Tom Brady. The Dallas Cowboys are 0-5, 0-6 against Brady all time.
Yeah.
He was one of the few quarterbacks that beat Dallas at home to start the season. I could maybe chuck that up to it's, kind of rust for Dallas, getting used to everything. They don't have Amari. They have to rely more on CD.
Yeah.
I think the potential is there. I think now that Tampa Bay has really struggled the last few games, they've been winning games just barely. The potential's there. I'm not going to say it's a favorite though, because I mean, it's in Tampa Bay. You still got to deal with Brady. You still got to deal with Fournette, their backup running back, who has been fantastic. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. And I mean, Dallas's secondary, other than Trayvon Diggs, who's a 50-50 shot, he's going to be able to light it up with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, no doubt. So
I agree.
So yeah, I don't have high hopes. I was hoping that maybe Dallas could get the 2 seed and they'd have to face like Danny Dimes, and I'd be like, oh man, thank God we get at least one win before we get the boot.
Yeah, for sure. Tony, I appreciate you joining me on the show tonight.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you for having me. As always, it's always a blast. And again, let me know whenever you need me to come on, and I'm more than happily to join you, brother.
Yes, sir. That is Tony Hollandsworth. That's my guy, my college football analyst. Knows his college football. Go and follow him on all social media platforms, and definitely tune in. Thanks for calling in tonight, Tony.
I appreciate it, brother. Have a good night.
You too.